Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Hope everyone's having a wonderful week. So this week we're joined by Madhu Kamari, who's been working as head of production in a fashion company for about 14 years, before leaving in 2020 to absorb herself fully in her spiritual journey. Before moving to London in 2007, she was a lecturer at Bombay University, having completed a doctorate in textiles and fashion. She has a keen interest in traditional Indian textiles and saris, and is now full-time Bhakti yoga practitioner and devotes all her time to volunteering at the local temples in various capacities. So we're very privileged and honoured to have you here. Thank you so much for joining, Mataji. Over to you.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. You all can hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. So yeah, new audience and new forum for me to be speaking on the Bhagavatam. Thank you very much for asking me to speak on this. So let's just dive in, really. Is it okay for us to do a short kirtan, or how do you do it? Do you just start, or do you do a kirtan, or?
It's up to you.
Right. Okay, fine. So in that case, I think we will just say our prayers and literally just dive in, yeah? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We will just say our prayers and then we will start. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurube Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So before we actually start discussing this Bhagavatam chapter, it is nice to just say another prayer actually. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm sure most of you must have heard it. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. The translation by Srila Prabhupada. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. So it's nice to say our prayers to all these personalities before we start. Right, so I'm totally new on this forum, and obviously I don't really very well know the format, but I've been asked to do like summary of chapter 18. So that's what I'm here to do. Okay. So chapter 18 is this chapter about Maharaj Parikshit being cursed by a Brahmana boy. Maybe you've already learned about Maharaj Parikshit a little bit, but just to have a slight background about Maharaj Parikshit. Obviously, he is the grandson of, Arjuna, and so he comes from this background. But interestingly, why was he given the name Parikshit? And that actually brings us to the story of Maharaj Parikshit's birth. So when the Kurukshetra battle was taking place between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, because the Kauravas were losing Ashwadhama, who is actually the son of the teacher of both Pandavas and Kauravas, lost his composure, and in a fit of anger, he released the Brahmastra. Prabhupada sometimes translates the Brahmastra as a kind of nuclear weapon. He released the Brahmastra, but he did not have the understanding or the power to call it back. And he actually wanted to kill the child which was still in the womb of his mother. And this child, who was kind of the last heir to the Pandavas, because he had already killed the sons of the Pandavas, and then he wanted to do this. And at that time, the mother obviously ran to Krishna for protection. Krishna entered the womb of the mother, and he saved the child. So this child actually got the darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead while he was in the womb of his mother. So when he was born, soon as he was born, he started searching for the Supreme Personality, and he started examining who could this person be. And in Hindi, exam or examining is pariksha. So Parikshit, that is where the name comes from, Parikshit. So he was examining because he was in search of this personality who had saved his life. So anyways, that is a little bit of the background. So we've heard about Parikshit Maharaj's birth. It was under very, very special circumstances. And in the first verse of the 18th chapter, the term that is used is, this was an adbhut. It was adbhut karma, which was done by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because imagine entering the womb of the mother, and he was wielding a mace at that time. Krishna was wielding a mace at that time, so that the Brahmastra could not harm this little fetus. So yeah, Krishna performed this very, very adbhut activity of saving Parikshit Maharaj in the womb. So this 18th chapter actually can be divided into four sections. And because we're doing a summary, so when it is divided into sections, it is easier to understand. So the first verses up to 8 verses actually is summarizing Maharaj's Parikshit's birth, death, and dealings with Kali. And then from the 9th to the 23rd, Suta Goswami and the sages are discussing about the glories of hearing about Krishna. Then from the 24th to the 31st verse, we hear about what happens when Maharaj Parikshit goes to the hermitage of the Shamika Rishi. And from the 32nd to 50th verse, it is about the curse which the Rishi's son Shringi gives to Parikshit Maharaj. Now, so the first verse is discussing about the birth, how it is so adbhut. And in the second verse, interestingly, already the death of Parikshit Maharaj is being discussed, although the curse comes later on in the chapter. And the reason why the death is being discussed is because when Parikshit Maharaj was born, as was, as in those days, the charts used to be prepared, the birth charts. And so the death was actually already predicted to Yudhishthir Maharaj. So what is being in the second verse of this chapter, what is being spoken about is how, although Parikshit Maharaj hears about his death, it does not faze him. It does not bother him at all. In fact, in the purport of verse 2, Prabhupada writes that a self-surrendered devotee of the Lord is called Narayana Parayana. And what that means is that such a person is never afraid of any place or person, not even death, because for him nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord. Now, Parikshit Maharaj knew that Narayan, Lord Krishna, had saved him when he was to be burned in the womb of his mother. And if he were to be killed by a snake bite, it would also take place by the will of the Lord. So the devotee does not ever go against the will of the Lord and accepts anything sent by the Lord as a blessing, right? Now, sometimes what happens is that when we come to Krishna consciousness or when we become devotees, we kind of think that, now I've become a devotee, I'm doing everything that is right. I'm wearing kanti, I wear my tilak, I go to the temple, I offer obeisances. So nothing will go wrong in my life. And that is not how it works. Because Krishna sometimes has to let sufferings come to us if it is going to purify us further. And the analogy that we can use sometimes is that when a person is ill, the doctor has to use injections. Taking injections is not something very pleasurable. I mean, I know some people may not be scared of it, but it still hurts, just for a second, but it does. Likewise, taking really bitter medicines is not pleasurable, but one has to, if one has to get cured. So same way, sometimes when suffering comes to devotees, it is also because Krishna has to send the suffering so that we get purified. Yes, Krishna does promise that if you surrender to me, I assure you, Sarvadharman paritajya mam ekam sharanam raja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasami ma sucha. He does say that I will relieve you of all your sinful actions and reactions. However, Krishna also says, as you surrender to me, the same way I reciprocate with you. So yes, we are trying to become Krishna conscious. We are doing all that is required. But what is our level of surrender? And unless we've not surrendered fully, then there are chances that our karmas or activities that we've done in the past will come back to us, but that will not come as a punishment. Krishna is giving you that to purify you, like a doctor does not give you injections or medicines as a punishment. He's doing it to cure you. And that is very important to understand, because what happens is, to remain steady in devotional service when such problems or calamities come is the test of a true devotee, somebody who is really, really trying. Right? I was reading just today that when we come to Krishna consciousness, we are very enthusiastic and very excited. And after a certain period of time has passed, we realize that there are some things which are very essential. There are austerities, and I'm not able to perform those. Somewhere I'm falling short. And so I feel bad about it. And I also realize that even with my endeavor, I'm not able to do it. That is because without the mercy of the Lord, no matter how much you do, you will only reach a certain stage. And that is when you actually depend on the mercy of the Lord and the mercy of the devotees. So very important to understand these few aspects. Anyways, the point is that the devotee does not, he does not take any negative experiences as something that is going to harm him. In fact, he takes it as a blessing from Krishna, and he turns the negative into positives. Like, for example, when Vidura, I'm sure most of you must have heard the story. Vidura is the brother of Dhritarashtra, and he was banned from the kingdom. He was banished and he was asked to leave. But when he was banished, what he did is, rather than taking this negative and sitting with it, he went on a pilgrimage and he became a sadhu. And same way over here, we will see that Parikshit Maharaj, when he hears that he's cursed and in 7 days he's going to die, he thinks, okay, how can I make my life perfect? How can I make these 7 days perfect? And that is what he does, right? In the verse 4, then it goes on to speak about how at the time of death, we are supposed to remember Krishna. Now, the verse translation goes like this. This was so because those who have dedicated their lives to the transcendental topics of the personality of Godhead of whom the Vedic hymns sing and who are constantly engaged in remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, do not run the risk of having misconceptions even at the last moment of their lives. Now, what is the misconceptions that people have? Everybody says that we should not be fearful of death. At least as devotees, we should not be fearful of death. And at the time of death, we should remember Krishna. But it is not very easy. And sometimes all kinds of thoughts come to us. And that is why it's said over here that, but for somebody who has dedicated their lives to the transcendental topics of the personality of Godhead, even death does not make them afraid. And they welcome that as well. Now, the question is, why is the time come for Maharaj Parikshit to leave this world? And Prabhupada explains in his purport that Kali was already waiting to enter. So Kali was, it's the time Kali was waiting, but could not enter as long as a righteous and pious king like Maharaj Parikshit is ruling. And that is why all of this had to happen so that Kali could then enter. And we read in a few of these verses here where obviously Kali is taking shelter of Maharaj Parikshit, saying that I am also a citizen, and then Maharaj Parikshit gives Kali places to live. Now, interestingly, in verse 7, it says that Maharaj Parikshit was a realist, right? Like the bees who only accept the essence of a flower, he knew perfectly well that in this age of Kali, auspicious things produced good effects immediately, whereas inauspicious acts must be actually performed to render effects. So he was never envious of the personality of Kali. So what actually is being discussed and what is important to understand from this verse is that why did he allow Kali to come, knowing what the effects would be? Because he had the confidence. And what was the confidence that he had? And it is spoken that actually there are a few advantages of Kali Yuga. And Prabhupada writes this in his purport where he speaks about the advantages. And the advantages are that because by the will of the Lord, a living being does not become a victim of a sinful act until the act is actually performed, right? Whereas in other ages, just by thinking of performing a sinful act, one would become a victim of the act. However, on the contrary, a living being in this age is awarded with the results of pious acts simply by thinking of them. The more you read this and you understand this, you realize how merciful the Lord is. You don't even have to perform the act. You just have to think about a pious act and you're going to get the results. I mean, this is where you have to understand that Krishna, Mahaprabhu, they are willing to give us everything just for us to turn towards them. This is the mercy of the Lord. And this is the advantages of being in Kali Yuga, right? So that is one advantage. The second advantage is, we all have heard this many times, that in other yugas, you had to perform various kinds of either austerities, yagyas, or different kind of pujas. But in Kali Yuga, we have been given the simple act of just chanting the holy name. How difficult is that? There are no rules, there are no regulations, there's no age factor, there's no education, there's no race, color, sex, no requirements at all. Simply chant the holy name of the Lord. And that is the way of, advancing and going towards the Lord and getting release from the clutches of Kali, right? And the third advantage is that just by listening to discourses on Lord Krishna's activities, one can get rid of all disadvantages. If I'm sure you're on the 18th chapter of the first canto, so you must have done the first few chapters where it says that Simply by the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme Lord becomes at once arrested within one's heart. Simply by the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. And you all have been listening and reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are the advantages of Kali Yuga. And Maharaj Parikshit knew that because he was such a pious and righteous king, he knew that he has got all his citizens to chant. Srila Prabhupada, in one of his purports, he writes about how we are using technology, and he's talking about radio in those days. He's talking about how we are using technology to transmit all kinds of things on the radio. Imagine if the authorities and if the leaders would actually be able to spread the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. How auspicious that would be. But we can see in Maharaj Parikshit times that he was doing that. All his citizens were pious, leading pious lives, performing good activities. And that is why he wasn't really concerned about the advent of Kali at that time. So he was not worried about it. So now we come to the second section of this chapter, which is verses 9 to 23, where Sutta Goswami and the sages are discussing about the glories of hearing about Krishna. And there are some very interesting interactions that is going on over here. The sages, of course, are very, very pleased to listen to Sutta Goswami, who is narrating the activities of Lord Krishna, and they are glorifying Sutta Goswami. They are blessing him. They are saying, may you live many years and have eternal fame, for you're speaking very nicely about the activities of Lord Krishna. Right? Now, we'll just focus on the verse 12 here, because this is very interesting, this verse. In verse 12, the sages are saying, and I will read the translation, we have just begun the performance of this fruitive activity, a sacrificial fire, without certainty of its result due to the many imperfections in our action. Our bodies have become black from the smoke, but we are factually pleased by the nectar of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead Govinda, which you are distributing. Now, what is happening here is that, as we've heard, these sages in the forest of Naimisharanya want to perform this fire sacrifice for the good of everybody. They are not selfish, they're doing it for the good of everybody. However, they are having doubts. And the doubts is because in Kali Yuga, you will not find, or you will find rare, in fact, Prabhupada says you won't find any Brahmanas who are able to recite the verses with the correct pronunciation. And if the pronunciation is wrong, any discrepancy, it spoils the whole show, and you don't know what the result will be. And I don't want to go too much into further pastimes of the Bhagavatam, but there is a pastime which will come in the future chapters of the Bhagavatam, where because of the wrong pronunciation of the Sanskrit verses, a demon was created by this sacrifice. So Prabhupada says that in Kali Yuga, there's no Brahmanas qualified to perform these sacrifices, and thus you're actually doubtful of the results. If you think about it, when you look at material activities, one is always doubtful about the results because there are so many factors that are involved. There's the karma, there's the time factor, you don't have any control. For example, Prabhupada in his purport is talking about agriculture. He's talking about the farmers. Let's say that the farmer has planned his crop and he's sown his seed such that he is anticipating the monsoon to come within a week, for it to start raining within a week. However, if the rains don't come within a week, those seeds will die. If the rains come before, those seeds will get washed out. So according to his karma, he had the intelligence, he did the endeavor, he worked hard. However, the time factor, which is Krishna himself, is such an important element. And so we have to understand that we cannot control anything. And that is why as devotees, we always are conscious that, and we never take any credit for any activities, because we are aware that we are not the controllers. Really, Krishna is always the controller. And so it is actually a nice position to be in, where you surrender to Krishna and you take shelter of Krishna, knowing that he is controlling everything, right? So here the sages understand that in this age of Kali, we don't know what is going to happen. And Prabhupada writes in his purport that what these unscrupulous and greedy brahmanas of the age of Kali, what they do is they induce the innocent public to such uncertain sacrificial shows without disclosing the scriptural injunction that in the age of Kali, there is no fruitful sacrificial performance but the sacrifice of the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. So in this age of Kali, there is no need, and you will not even get the result for any other austerity or sacrifice. The injunction for the age of Kali is that you chant the holy name of the Lord. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there's this very beautiful verse 2.40, in chapter 2, verse 40. It's such a nice verse, and it says, Neha Vikrama Nasho Stri Pratyavahana Vidyate Svalpamavya Asya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bhayat. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So the point being made here is that one may want to perform sacrifice, one may want to perform various austerities, but you don't know the result. However, even if you do not come to the conclusion of your spiritual life, but there is no loss or diminution. And this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. And it's being said that even a little advancement on this path can protect you from the most dangerous type of fear. Right? So verses 9 to 23 are obviously talking about glorification of Krishna. Verse 13 in this chapter, a very, very important and significant verse. And I'll just read the translation again. It says that the value of a moment's association with the devotee of the Lord cannot even be compared to the attainment of heavenly planets or liberation from matter. And what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. So what's being said here is that association of devotees is sometimes considered even more important than association of the Lord himself and association of gurus. And somebody may say, why? We say association of a pure devotee even for a second is so great it'll purify you. Yes, that is right. However, how pure are your gurus and the Lord? And imagine somebody like us, sometimes insignificant, we don't realize how we are behaving, what we are saying, what we are doing. Sometimes we may cause offenses. However, the devotees of the Lord are so merciful that association of the devotees can actually help us in our spiritual path. And that is why this verse, where it is being said that association of devotees is so, so important. And we have actually a live example from the Shastras about Dhruva Maharaj. I don't know how many of you have heard the story of 5-year-old Dhruva Maharaj. Maybe some of you have, maybe some haven't. So in brief, I will talk about Dhruva Maharaj. He was 5 years old, was not being nicely treated by his stepmother and his father, who was the king. And so he was very upset, and he decided that he is going to the forest to perform austerities because he wanted a kingdom that would be larger than not just his father's, but his grandfather's also, right? And when he's going to the forest, of course, he meets Narad Muni on the way, and Narad Muni tries to discourage him, saying, you're just a 5-year-old boy, just go home. This is not for you. And he says, please do not discourage me. I am going to go to the forest to perform austerities because this is what I want, right? And eventually, after performing, austerities, he gets the darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna himself. And when he gets the darshan of Lord Krishna, this little 5-year-old boy, um, I mean, imagine Lord Krishna standing in front of you. I can't imagine it. So, but if you all can, I'm not at that stage, but somebody was talking about, I was attending this class at the manor by His Grace Atul Krishna Prabhu. And he actually spoke about this, imagine that if Krishna is standing in front of you, what would you do? He was talking about that. Anyways, this little Dhruva Maharaj wants to offer prayers. He's just a 5-year-old boy and he wants to offer prayers. And by the mercy of the Lord, he is able to offer various prayers. And his prayers are obviously very famous, like prayers of all other devotees from the Bhagavatam. But one of the verse he speaks is, he says that, "O unlimited Lord, kindly bless me so that I may associate with great devotees who engage in your transcendental loving service constantly as the waves of a river constantly flow. Such transcendental devotees are completely situated in an uncontaminated state of life. By the process of devotional service, I shall surely be able to cross the ocean of material existence, which is filled with the waves of blazing fire-like dangers. It'll be very easy for me, for I am becoming mad to hear about your transcendental qualities and pastimes, which are eternally existent." So imagine that he's standing in front of the personality of Godhead and he's begging for association of devotees. Can you imagine how important association of devotees is? Sometimes we may take it for granted, but when you hear such prayers from the Bhagavatam, you actually start to realize that your life is nothing if not for the association of devotees. So yeah, we must all take a moment to actually think about this very important point. So so these are the verses: glorification of the Lord, glorification of his devotees. The Lord also so many times says that devotees are more dear to me. We've heard that many times. Then we come to the next group of verses from 24 to 31, where actually Maharaj Parikshit gets angry on Shamika Rishi, and so let's listen to this the story of what actually transpires. So here Maharaj Parikshit is in the forest, he is hunting, and eventually he is extremely tired, very, very thirsty and hungry. And he reaches this hermitage of this sage. He sees the sage who is in meditation. Maharaj Parikshit goes there expecting that he will be received nicely. Prabhupada says that even if you have absolutely nothing else to offer a guest, you must offer him a mat to sit, a cup of water, and some sweet words. So Maharaj Parikshit, although he was the king, he was not expecting any kingly kind of reception, but all that he expected was that I would at least be asked for a glass of water. The sage was deep in meditation, so he did not even realize, didn't feel the presence of the king, and obviously did not open his eyes, did not offer him anything, no sweet words, no mat to sit, no water. And this really enraged Maharaj Parikshit. And in his anger, when he was leaving the hut, he found a dead snake. He picked up the dead snake with his sword or whatever, and he put it around the neck of the sage. And then he left from there. It is said that once he left and he reached his palace, obviously he started to think about this, that, I think I've committed a big mistake. But that's one side of the story. And the other is that here, the sage's son, Shringi, hears about this incident. that this has happened and the king has insulted my father. So when he hears about this, some of the verses that he speaks and the way he speaks is, it's just, I mean, I'm sure you must have read it, but so he starts with, in verse 32, he says, so 24 to 31 was about what happened with Parikshit Maharaj and Shamak Rishi. And then from verses 32 to 50 is how Shringi is then cursing. So here Shringi says, just look at the sins of the rulers who, like crows and watchdogs at the door, perpetrate sins against their masters, contrary to the principles governing servants. Now you see here how he is calling a Kshatriya king a watchdog. Now, yes, the Kshatriyas and the kings, the rulers, are there to protect everybody. And yes, the Brahmana class is above the Kshatriyas. But the Brahmanas are there to bless the Kshatriyas. And here Shringi, was so angry about what has happened with his father that without thinking about it, without realizing what is going on and what he is doing, he spoke very, very harsh words. He goes on to say that the descendants of the kingly orders are definitely designated as watchdogs, and they must keep themselves at the door. On what grounds can dogs enter the house and claim to dine with the master on the same plate? Can you imagine how the words that he's using here, right? In the purport of this verse, Prabhupada says, the inexperienced Brahmana boy certainly knew that the king asked for water from his father, and the father did not respond. He tried to explain away his father's inhospitality in an impertinent manner befitting an uncultured boy. He was not at all sorry for the king's not being well received. On the contrary, he justified the wrong act in a way characteristic of the Brahmanas of Kali Yuga. He compared the king to a watchdog, and so it was wrong for the king to enter the home of a Brahmana and ask for water from the same pot. The dog is certainly reared by its master, but that does not mean that the dog shall claim to dine and drink from the same pot. So you see here, Prabhupada goes on to explain that this is where the down of the Brahmanas actually start. Because the Brahmanas are being respected as the head of society. But then you have to also behave like that, right? And in one of the purport, Prabhupada goes on to explain that one may think that why are the Brahmanas then behaving like that? And if you read the purport, Prabhupada explains that these Brahmanas actually were demons previously. And they were given this good fortune by the mercy of the Lord that they take birth in Brahmana's family so that they can purify themselves. However, like we say, because of your past deeds and past activities, so these Brahmanas, rather than taking on the good fortune and behaving like cultured Brahmanas, actually started behaving like demons. So, Prabhupada explains this in the purport, and Shringi actually is behaving exactly like that, like an uncultured boy. And then in verse 37, Shringi then pronounces his curse, and he says, the Brahmana's son, so the translation of the verse says, the Brahmana's son cursed the king thus. On the 7th day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of that dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, thus the beginning of the misuse of Brahmanical power began, and gradually the Brahmanas in the age of Kali became devoid of both Brahmanical powers and culture. The Brahmana boy considered Maharaj Parikshit to be Kulangara, or the wretched of the dynasty, but factually, the Brahmana boy himself was so, because only from him did the Brahmana caste become powerless, like the snake whose poisoned teeth are broken. So imagine that just this one act of this young boy Shringi, who did not even, sometimes it's said that if you give powers and strength to somebody who is not mature to use it, then there is always misuse of such things. And we can see it in this case where Shringi did not have the maturity to use the powers that he had. And in his immaturity, he has committed such a great mistake, right? And eventually, Shringi realizes this also. So when he goes to his father, his father is still deep in meditation. And he sees this snake which is around his neck. And then he realizes and he starts crying. When Shamak Rishi hears the cries of his son, he opens his eyes and he asks him what has happened. And at that time, Shringi tells him everything that has, entailed till now, finally coming to the curse that he has given to Maharaj Parikshit. And at that time, the Rishi is full of lamentation. The reason he's full of lamentation is he explains to his son that, the king is not just an ordinary king. He is a righteous king, he is a pious king, and you have made such a big mistake. So what is happening here is, even though the Rishi sees the snake on his neck, he doesn't think too much of it. He just literally takes it off. But he is in deep regret about what his son has done. And he speaks to his son. There are many, a couple of verses actually where from verses 41 to 44, where, the Rishi is actually very, very upset about what has happened. He's sad that his son has, cursed this very righteous king, a very good king. And he goes on to say to him, in fact, one of the places, one of the verses that I'm just going to read, where he says that, he says to his son, the Emperor Parikshit is a pious king. He is highly celebrated and is a first-class devotee of the personality of Godhead. He is a saint amongst royalty and has performed many horse sacrifices. When such a king is tired and fatigued, being stricken with hunger and thirst, he does not at all deserve to be cursed. So Shamak Rishi is admitting that Maharaj Parikshit was cursed most unjustly. And he goes on to then say that, obviously he is worried about what has happened. He's worried that his son has made such a mistake. He is also, and this is very interesting when Prabhupada is explaining that if somebody does wrong to you and you do wrong back to him sometimes, and that act is somewhere, kind of cut off, that, okay, I did this and he did this. So yeah. But he's aware that the devotees of the Lord will not do something like this. The devotees of the Lord will just tolerate. They will not give back. They will not retaliate. They will not do anything. He said that, my son he was praying to the Supreme Lord, and he said that my son has committed such a big mistake, and he goes on, he's thinking that the devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. So now he is worried. He knows that the Lord will not forgive a person who has committed an offense at the feet of a devotee. So what is going to happen? What will happen? He's worried about his son, as any father would. And then in verse 48, I just read the verse 48, where it is said that the devotees will not, they don't want to avenge themselves. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that Rishi Shamika thought within himself that if Maharaj Parikshit would counter curse the boy, he might be saved. But he knew also that a pure devotee is callous about worldly advantages or reverses. As such, the devotees are never inclined to counteract personal defamation, curses, negligence, etc. As far as such things are concerned, in personal affairs, the devotees do not care for them. But in the case of they are being performed against the Lord and his devotees, then the devotees take very strong action. It was a personal affair, and therefore Shammaka Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. Thus, there was no alternative then to place an appeal to the Lord for the immature boy. So the father knows that there is no other recourse other than actually just praying to the Supreme Lord and begging for forgiveness for the mistake that his immature son has done. Interestingly, it goes, the verse goes on to say, and this is in verse 49, which is again very interesting. It says that obviously in the Purport Prabhupada is explaining that everything is clear now, that Maharaj Parikshit's garlanding the sage with a dead snake was not at all a very serious offense, but Shringi's cursing the king was a serious offense. And Maharaj Parikshit obviously did not mind the curse, and we've heard that already. He took full advantage. And in the last few lines of this particular purport, verse 49, Prabhupada says that by the will of Lord, Maharaj Parikshit achieved the highest perfection of life through the grace of Srila Sukadev Goswami. And obviously, what is the highest perfection of life? It is that now the Srimad Bhagavatam will be spoken. Actually, it was the desire of the Lord, and Maharaj Parikshit, Rishi Shammaka, and his son Shringi were all instrument in fulfilling the desire of the Lord. So, the desire of the Lord was that now he wants to incarnate in Kali Yuga as the Srimad Bhagavatam. We all know that Srimad Bhagavatam is the literally incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Lord incarnates always, generally and most likely in response to prayers of his devotees, or when his devotees are in danger. Like Lord Narsingadev came when Prahlad Maharaj was in danger. Mahaprabhu came when Advaita Acharya was praying, begging him to come, saying, look at the condition of Kali Yuga. And here now, all this had to be orchestrated so that the Lord would advent as Srimad Bhagavatam. And Parikshit Maharaj took this as a great fortune to perfect his life and go back to Godhead. And thus, in these last 7 days of his life, he decided to take shelter of his guru, Sukadev Goswami. And Sukadev Goswami was able to speak the entire Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. So, like we spoke earlier in the session, that how devotees take all reversals in their life and turn it into positives. And that is what, it's not easy. Like we spoke, that sometimes a devotee also is not able to stay steady in his practices, in his sadhana. When a lot of calamities come, you do get disturbed. But then we have to learn from these great personalities in Srimad Bhagavatam that how these reversals can be turned into positives. But it's not just that they can be turned into positives. What it is taking these reversals as the mercy of the Lord for us to progress. Like how you would willingly go and subject yourself to getting injections from the doctor or getting operated, and your body is being cut open because you want to get better. So when you remember this analogy of the injections and the operations, then you will know that whatever comes to you, because There is karma. We spoke about karma. Yes, the Lord says that he will get rid of your sinful activities, but that is dependent on your level of surrender. So if you've surrendered 20%, then 20% of your karma is okay, burnt away. But the other 80%, Krishna is still holding on to it. And he might give it to you as and when he thinks is required for you to become purified. So when something like that comes, take it as Krishna's mercy. Have faith in Krishna that whatever he is doing is only for our best. We may not be able to see it because we cannot see the full picture. We don't have that vision, but it is for our best. And with that faith, we still remain steady in our devotional practices and in our sadhana. So the takeaway from, I think, this whole incident or this story of Shamak Rishi would be that, face your karma bravely. Don't react. Think of the consequences, like Shringi reacted. A saint, you could see that Shamak Rishi, in all circumstances, he remained calm and cool in all situations. Sometimes our senses can make us do activities which we would not under normal circumstances do. Here we're talking about hunger and thirst. Parikshit Maharaj, when he went back and he was contemplating what he had done, he knew that under normal circumstances he would not do what he's done. So sometimes our senses do that, and that is why it is so very important to try and control our senses as much as we can. And it says that yes, we are in Kali Yuga, and yes, although Kali Yuga may have all kinds of bad qualities, but it still has some very, very, very good qualities. And what we need to remember, the good qualities are that unless you actually commit sinful activities, you will not get the reactions for it. However, even the thought of committing a pious activity, you get reaction. The second is that in other ages, you had to perform various kinds of sacrifices and austerity. In Kali Yuga, the only austerity, the only sacrifice that one has to perform is chant the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And in Kali Yuga, listening to Krishna Katha, listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, will bring Krishna close and close to you. And associating with the person Bhagavat, associating with devotees of the Lord is your only way back, going back home, back to Godhead. So this is kind of the summary, what we can take away from this chapter. I should stop here. It is 5 to 9. And I was asked that I should finish at 9 or just before, so we have time for if there are any comments or corrections or questions maybe, and I can try to answer.
If anyone has any questions, if they just want to unmute themselves.
If I can start first of all, Mataji, if that's okay. I've got a few to ask, but I'm sure a few people will raise their hands in between. If I just quickly start off with, I heard somewhere that Maharaj Parikshit basically did what he did at that time because he wore the crown of Jarasangh, and because of the gold being stolen, right? Mm-hmm. That was the reason why he lost his frame of mind at that point in time. Now, I've heard that in a gatha, by the way, but I'm not sure as to the validity of it. So I'd like to ask whether that was something that you've read or you heard of or anything like that, because that makes sense to me due to the fact that he had given Kali Yuga the residence of being in gold, and hence he wore gold that was stolen, etc. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I was doing research on this topic and I listened to a lot of ISKCON speakers and Prabhupada books and that, I didn't come across this katha anywhere. So yeah, I did listen to a couple of ISKCON speakers, and even the purports or anywhere, like the entire chapter, Prabhupada doesn't mention this anywhere. So I'm not sure. I haven't heard it. I'm sure it might be there, but like I said, when I was listening to a few lectures, I didn't come across this.
Okay, fine. No, that's okay. I just wanted to get clarification on that.
Yeah.
I've got a few other points, but we'll go straight to Kathy. If Kathy Mataji can ask her questions, she's got her hands up. And if anyone else wishes to ask questions, please raise your hands. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Please accept my obeisances. Oh, glory to you. I wanted to ask, because you've mentioned that we have to, at the time we are living body, we have to think about Krishna so that we reach him, which the Bhagavad Gita says, and which the stories of all these great personalities in Bhagavatam confirm. And I wanted, actually, I'm curious, because one of my good sister has a husband who has dementia, which is getting worse and worse. So, and they are both fairly new devotees. So I was wondering, because the bhakti is a process, so how do you guide a devotee like this who is fairly new and who has dementia towards Krishna by the time he leaves his body?
Mataji, I obviously, from the medical point of view, I would not be able to say anything, because dementia means that you eventually tend to forget almost everything, But from another point of view, what I've heard, and I've heard even Prabhupada saying, and I've heard so many places, because sometimes, when you lose your life in an accident and it's so sudden that, you don't have the time sometimes. But I've heard Prabhupada saying that, your entire life, if you've been Krishna conscious and if you're thinking of Krishna, then don't worry at the time of death, because then your Guru and Prabhupada is there to take care of you. I've also heard that when people are seriously ill, philosophically, we could talk about, there is this prayers of King Kulashekar. He's a very, very devout devotee of Lord Ram. And he's praying that, please take me now, because I don't know at the time of death what will happen when my whole body is in pain and, my mouth and my throat is full of mucus and bile, whether I would be able to chant your name or no. Which is a true fact that when people are ill, it's a difficult situation. But as devotees, we have the option of constantly having the Mahamantra playing. And I think most of us do that. Like in our respective houses, I think we've got the Mahamantra playing. When devotees are ill, I know that a lot of devotees surround, this person who is in his last stages or whatever, and are constantly either reading or chanting, or, Prabhupada's tape is playing. And finally, Prabhupada says that, you don't worry. If you won't remember me, I will remember you. And Krishna says that I will think of you. So, of course, we don't know whether we are at that stage. All we can do is, like I said in the beginning of the class, is that we can only endeavor and pray for the mercy of the Lord, realizing that our endeavor is never going to be good enough. It's not, it's like Prabhupada says, Krishna consciousness is easy, but at the same time, it can be difficult. So all we can do is pray for the mercy. But coming back to your, your topic where you're saying that they're fairly new, the only thing that can save all of us and every one of us is just chanting the holy name. If one can't chant, listen. Prabhupada says, Shravanam Kirtanam. For this age, for Kali Yuga, that is the only thing that can save us. And we have to just constantly keep reminding ourselves of that. I remember once in one class I was listening, and Prabhupada asked all his disciples, he said, why do you think I have written all these books? And there were various answers. Some people said, Prabhupada, so that we understand Krishna. Others said, so that we understand the philosophy. And there were various answers. And you know what Prabhupada said? He said, I have written this book so that you develop this firm conviction that only chanting will take you back to Godhead. So the whole idea of even writing and understanding and listening is chanting. So we come back to the same thing. The goal and the means is the same. That's chanting. And if one can't chant, then at least one can hear. I hope that kind of makes sense. Because Prabhupada also said that even little children, whether they understand or they don't, when first he started spreading Krishna consciousness and he went to so many different countries, he said, it doesn't matter whether you understand what this mantra is saying or no. It doesn't matter whether the child is understanding or no. The fact that he is chanting is going to help him. And the fact that he is listening. I hope that kind of...
Mataji. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
If anyone else wishes to ask a question, Shakshi Mataji, would you like to unmute yourself and ask?
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. What a wonderful class, Mataji. Very heartfelt and a beautiful summary. Mataji, I have a very simple question. I'm a very fallen soul, but I would like to ask Mataji is that if someone has hurt you and you say that you have to, at that point of time, control your senses, but if you don't reiterate and make that person realize that, you know, he or she has done something wrong, they will continue to hurt you, you know, in the future. So how would you stop that further reactions? Because finally it is affecting you. The person is affected. The person does, you know, hurting you may or may not realize, but it affects me as
So,
Thank
yeah,
Hare
no
Krishna.
problem. No problem. So, first of all, we have to understand a couple of things over here. What is the person hurting? Is it our ego, pride? Or so is it an emotional hurt? Is it, you know, physical abuse? Is it mental abuse? And one thing that we have to understand that, yes, as devotees, we are tolerant and we have to tolerate, but that does not mean that we tolerate abuse. It does not mean that you tolerate abuse. Now, the point is that what action do we take then? Sometimes you may think that me reacting will solve that problem, but sometimes it may not. You may have to bring in a third party.
This is a big body.
Sorry. Sorry, Mataji, can you unmute yourself? I've just incorrectly muted you.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, so what you have to understand is that, you know, will my reacting and saying something, will it change the situation, right? I remember many years back, we were in a Sangha, and this was by His Grace Gaur Gopal Prabhu. And he gave this one formula, you know, which is very interesting. And he called it the CAR formula, C-A-R. So what he said is that if you're in a situation where you're being hurt, you know, in whichever way, emotional, mental, physical, whatever. So for C, he said, can you change the situation? You know, change as in, I don't know, get a third party to explain, or if you think you can talk to the person and he may be understanding of your circumstance, of what you are going through. So first action would be to change the situation. So that's C. The other is A. You've tried to change the situation. You've tried everything. It doesn't work. So then the second step is that you will have to accept that this is just how this person is. And I have to accept if I have to deal with this person. Like, let's say that you're in a workplace, you know, you've tried to speak to your colleague who is rude to you, but that person is not understanding. So you'll have to accept it because you are going to be going to your work Monday to Friday every single day. What are you going to do, right? So you try to change, no change happens. So then you have to accept it. And the third is R, which is remove yourself from that situation. Now, sometimes things may be really, really bad. You've tried change, you've tried to accept, but it is not working and it is affecting you. It is affecting you very, very deeply. So then you have to remove yourself from that situation. And this is what Gaur Gopal Prabhu said, you know, this is the CAR formula. Can I apply it? I can try, you know, whether it is in my material field or my spiritual field. The first is, like I said, change. And when we say change, what we try to say is Get authorities to help you, get your higher ups to help you, get seniors to help you, get, friends, relatives, whoever to help you. Nothing happens, and yes, we are accepting that, okay, this person, this is his nature, this is his inherent nature. I am not going to allow it to affect me because I have realized that it is not because of me, it is this person's nature. So can I come to that stage where I can accept? If both of them don't work, then obviously I have to see how I can remove. When I say remove, I don't mean physically remove. I mean that I'm not going to invest in this person at all. If it means that I have minimum interactions, I try and limit whatever I'm doing with this person, or I don't see them, like that. So this is what I learned. I hope it helps you.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Thank you once again.
Okay, thank you very much, Mataji. If I could just ask my other question, if that's okay. Sorry to. You were talking about the demons being given a birth as Brahmins, and so I was like thinking, well, this is non-different to, let's say, a father who's giving sweets to their child, and then all of a sudden, because they've been mischievous, you're taking the sweets away. So in this case, I'm just sort of thinking out loud that Krishna's given them the opportunity to become Brahmins, but knowingly Krishna would have known how that they would have misbehaved, and so it just doesn't make sense why you're taking away something which you already evidently know what's going to happen. So I just want your thoughts on that.
It's funny, but ways of Krishna are very mysterious, right? I mean, if you think about it, there's so many things that have happened in the pastimes of Krishna and the Leela of Krishna, which you will think that, like the Battle of Kurukshetra for that matter. He very easily could have just, killed everybody and, whatever else had to, but still the battle happened. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, and I will just read what he says, because, it's best to take what Prabhupada is saying and, rather than. So he says that if the question is raised why the Brahmana community as a whole was made responsible for allowing Kali into the world affairs, the answer is given in the Varaha Purana, that the demons who acted inimically towards the personality of Godhead, but were not killed by the Lord, were allowed to take birth in the families of Brahmanas to take advantage of the age of Kali. The all-merciful Lord gave them a chance to have their births in the families of pious Brahmanas so that they could progress towards salvation, right? But the demons, instead of utilizing the good opportunity, misused the Brahmanical culture due to being puffed up by the vanity in becoming Brahmanas. Now, your question could lead us to the other question where in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, okay, somebody who is on the path of spiritual life and does not complete his spiritual, at least he may then take birth in an aristocratic family or in, in a family where spiritual family. Now, so Krishna is giving us this opportunity. So as time factor, Krishna is giving us this opportunity. We always have to remember there's two factors which are working on us. However, there is the karma, our karma, for God knows how many lifetimes. Yes, in this lifetime, I'm doing pious activities, and I probably will go to be born in a family where I can continue with my spiritual activities. And that is where Krishna says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, Karmana Daivi Netrena. So your next birth is based on your karma and Daivi Netrena. Yes, Krishna will intervene wherever is needed. Still your karmas are there, which you have to deal with at some point of time. And here, I mean, I'm nobody to speculate, but this is what Prabhupada is writing in his purport, that yes, these were demons. Krishna gave them the chance, but they just became puffed up. And this is what happened. It's like, yes, we may have these doubts. We can have these doubts even if we look at our own material life. Let's say that in ISKCON, we've had in the past that, devotees have reached up to a stage of sannyasis, and then unfortunately they have fallen down. So one may say that but Krishna knew this is going to happen. So why did, you come to that stage? But that's Krishna's way of treating all of us, giving us what we need for our further purification. That is my understanding from Prabhupada's purpose.